I'm a veterinary pathologist. I run the diagnostic service and work on a variety of different things. Kind of the jack of all trades and master of none, so to speak. I work on everything from tadpoles to pygmy sperm whales, and most recently bats. I'll tell you, I'm not a bat biologist. I know a little bit about diseases, but I have to defer to you guys on anything beyond the microscope or the necropsy lab. As Hazel's already told you, we are repeating some of the work that she's done with Geomyces panorum, with Geomyces destructans in our lab. Kind of become the Barton Lab South. I guess she talks funny, I talk funny, we're made to work together. But I don't crawl around in caves. I just fly a microscope around the room when I'm not cutting up dead stuff. We did repeat a lot of the Geomyces destructans or Geomyces panorum experiments with Geomyces destructans, and the results are pretty similar. So far, Geomyces destructans is fully susceptible to the agents that are efficacious against G. panorum. So there's nothing special about this fungus, and her surrogate species that she's working with is working very well. In addition to that, we're looking at a number of other things. One thing that I'm very interested in is persistence of this fungus. David Blear's done a lot of work with it. He's shown this growth curve based on temperature. We know that it doesn't grow very well or survive very well at warm temperatures, but that's on culture plates. What does it do on a bat? And that's a much more different system. This fungus actually invades the keratin on the skin surface, and I'll show you some photomicrographs later where you can see it getting in that keratin layer, and that might confer some resistance to this to harsher environmental conditions. And it also might confer some competitive advantage in the face of other fungi. Right now I'm looking at some keratin baiting assays, trying to develop some in vitro experiments. Basically we're looking at sources of keratin in the lab, trying to get the fungus to invade that keratin, and then we can do various treatments on it in the lab. This does seem a little bit academic, but it's really pretty important, because if the fungus survives at higher temperatures in the keratin layers, then it can greatly affect the transmission dynamics. This thing might be able to be transmitted much more readily during the warmer months. And this is a photomicrograph showing a bat, the skin of a bat that's affected by white nose syndrome. This is a hair shaft here. We're seeing down into the follicle. Here's another abaxial section of the follicle. Here's the hair here. And the fungus grows along these keratin layers and dives right in beside the hair in these follicles. So it gets down in the skin where it can possibly be relatively protected. And on the surface as well, it gets in this very thin layer of keratin. Here you can see the fungus just wrapping around this hair shaft. Pathologist, so I have to show some gratuitous histopathology slides to confuse people to make myself look smarter. And this is another photograph of bat wing membrane. This one's stained with a PAS stain, which highlights the fungus. And these little aggregates here are the fungus on the skin surface. And they kind of depress the skin a little bit, but they will get in those keratin layers as well. Based along the same lines, we were interested in the possibility of bats be transmitting this fungus during the warmer months, and working with Craig Styler of West Virginia. We got some fall swarm samples last year. At the time, the samples were a little bit ahead of our assays. He was already out there working with these bats. We felt like we probably needed to get the samples while we could. Trying to determine if the fungus might be present on those bats while they're commingling during the fall swarm. Swabs were taken and hairs were plucked from the muzzle. They were negative by the current assays that we're using, but I'm not really satisfied with the sensitivity of those assays. I'm trying to increase the sensitivity, and we still have those samples in the lab. We'll go back and test them again. One thing I want to talk to you about is the surveillance support that we're providing. We do have a diagnostic lab, and we're there to help any of you guys that are doing surveillance for white nose syndrome. We are the Southeastern Cooperative Wildlife Disease Study, so we're funded by 17 Southeastern states, but we're also funded by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and USDA. And there's been some question initially, well, who are the member states? Well, if you think you're in the Southeast, you're probably a member state. I mean, we extend all the way to the Great Lakes now. I mean, obviously, we need to change our name. And if you live in New England and you live in a house trailer, if we feel pity, we'll take your samples. Probably got something in relation with it. We're using the protocols and diagnostic guidelines that were established by the National Wildlife Health Centers. They've been on top of this thing for a number of years. And they've really kind of got it together. There's no point in us trying to reinvent the wheel or trying to compete with them. We're just there to complement the service that they're providing. And we're trying to generate comparable data. We're trying to get the same results that they have so that our data means the same thing that the data from their lab means. Currently, the submission is really at the discretion of the agency that's submitting stuff. If you want to send them to Madison, go ahead and send them to Madison, but we'll gladly take them from whatever states are members of our agency or from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service as well. The surveillance support is distinct from a regular diagnostic service. We run a diagnostic lab where we investigate mortality events in all kinds of species except fish. I don't do fish. But just about every other vertebrate we'll look at. And in those cases, we do a really extensive post-mortem investigation. We do complete necropsies, we run toxicologic assays on those things, we do histopathology, everything you can think of to get a diagnosis. In this case, we're just trying to get an answer as quickly as possible to the people who are doing white nose syndrome surveillance. So it's running through a separate service, and we're just trying to get these samples done as quickly as possible, so we're just looking for GMICs destructans. And this is for assessment of samples collected during hibernacular surveys. If you've got a bunch of Mexican free-tailed bats in August in Florida, it's probably not white nose syndrome. You're welcome to submit to us, and we'll run through a regular diagnostic assay. But if you're doing hibernacular surveys in the wintertime, probably needs to we'll submit it through this service here. We're just trying to provide one specific answer to these cases: is it positive for white nose syndrome or not? In some cases, we do still get submissions in which there's obviously some other mortality factor involved, and we can shut those through our other service and just take a little bit longer. We can still answer very quickly whether or not it's white nose syndrome. Communication with our lab is very important. It's key for coordination of samples. A lot of times people send things and they don't make it there. If we know they're coming, we can get on the phone and find out where they are. If they're sitting in the FedEx or UPS office over a holiday weekend, it's not going to do the samples any good. So it's nice if we know they're coming ahead of time. And it also helps me shunt these samples into the proper service for these students. As far as submission guidelines, we have a submission form that's available for you guys. I asked our webmaster to put it up on the webpage, but notice today it's still not there. It's been made available by email. If you need it, please ask me and I can email it to you. I promise to get it up on our website as well. We need folks to ship refrigerated bats on ice packs for overnight delivery. Ask that you bag the bats by species. Sometimes when they get mushed and they're rotten and they're mixed together, I have a hard time telling one from another. I guess I haven't reached Hazel's skill at speciating bats. They look a lot different when they're rotten and mushed together in a bag, I can tell you that. Place these in the cooler with ice packs, not with wet ice. We don't want things leaking. And you need to use a styrofoam cooler inside a cardboard box. This is a good example of how not to send this. This was an actual submission. It arrived in this beer cooler with the turkey's head falling out. And, I have never seen a UPS guy more pissed off than that one. It was nasty. We just put it inside of the box. But these are the types of boxes you need to use. Either this or a good plastic cooler will do fine if it's sealed up very well. And there are a number of vendors available for these. These do cost money. We'll gladly return them to people submitting them. If you ask us to, it helps if you add a return address label. It just expedites things in the lab, and it's less likely to get lost in most cases. As far as diagnostic criteria, again, we're using the same criteria that were developed by Carol Ledire at the National Wildlife Health Center. She published this in the Journal of Veterinary Diagnostic Investigation recently. Excuse me, my voice is going. I'm getting over a cold. I had a friend from New York come down a couple of weeks ago and left me with a cold. I guess this goes back to what Eric was saying. We're relatively disease-free till these damn Yankees started sending